Happy Saturday, and if you don't know it, we are now about 90 days away from kickoff of game one against the UTEP Miners. So today I want to go over the Huskers' first opponent. Is UTEP an easy opponent for Dylan Raiola and this Husker team in their opening game? So let's find out. Finally, the Huskers open a season at home and not against a Big Ten opponent, as the Huskers' first opponent is the UTEP Miners out of El Paso, Texas. The Miners come into 2024 with a new head coach in Scotty Walden. Walden comes in after producing 4 winning seasons at FCS Austin Peay. He starts his first year bringing over 10 transfers, mostly on the offense, hoping to spark a UTEP offense that was dismal last year. He also brings over his whole coaching staff, as Austin Peay didn't retain anyone from his staff, to help him produce the same winning teams as he did at Austin Peay. Walden is also the youngest FBS head coach at 34, but this young man is a ball of energy and will definitely be very active in getting this team on its feet. Walden didn't name a starter for the spring game, a starting quarterback for the spring game, but incumbent Cade McConnell played in 7 games for UTEP last season and looked decent, and looks like he could probably handle this. But one of Walden's transfers he brought in was Skylar Locklear from Austin Peay, quarterback. So that's going to be McConnell's biggest challenge, as one thing that Locklear has over McConnell is that he knows the system extremely well, and he's more or basically a dual threat quarterback. So I expect Locklear to give McConnell a run for his money before a starter is probably announced sometime this fall. Now, UTEP does have a dynamic wide receiver in Cam Thomas, who's only 5'7", but is very electric once you get the balls in his hands. I could see Walden and this coaching staff doing everything they can and doing their best to get the ball in Thomas's hands in every way possible. There's a total of 4 wide receivers that followed Walden over from Austin Peay, along with running back Javon Jackson, who will definitely be a key piece in this new offensive scheme that Walden wants to bring over, as Jackson rushed for 1,373 yards last season and 10 touchdowns for Austin Peay. This gives this UTEP team a proven running back to build their offense around, along with Eastern Kentucky transfer Jaden Smith. Smith is a wide receiver that I guarantee is going to keep the Huskers secondary on their toes in game one and give them an early test. So it's not going to be a walk in the park as some might think it's going to be. If anything is looking good for the Huskers, is that UTEP will be starting a brand new offensive line and in its entirety. I could already see Nash, Hutmacher, and Ty Robson licking their chops. And if Rule plans to get more of a 4-man pass rush this season, it needs to start here in game one. Now, on the defensive side, it wasn't just transfers that came with Walden over to El Paso. Like I said, he brought his whole coaching staff, which includes defensive coordinator J.J. Clark as well. Clark's Austin Peay team only gave up 24 points, just over 24 points per game last season, and he hopes to produce the same success at UTEP as he did there at Austin Peay. Now, the secondary does have some question marks, as Walden will be starting a whole new secondary from a year ago, replacing all 4 starters in the secondary, as well as the team will be learning a whole new defensive scheme, as they will be learning that 3-3-5 defense that you saw Tony White bring over to the Huskers. So this team will have to learn and grow quickly under Clark's new system. I feel UTEP's opponents this year might have a harder time trying to figure out this 3-3-5 just because, which is kind of what we saw at times last year against the Huskers. Clark does have some help also on this defensive side, as two of his players from Austin Peay came over with him in transfers. Corey Chapman and Xavier Smith both combined for 148 tackles and 2 interceptions under Clark's system at Austin Peay. Combine those two with UTEP returnees A.J. Odoms, Oscar Moore, and Josiah Allen, and I feel the secondary might be better than most people think, especially as the season goes on. The big question for Walden and his staff is who will be their starting quarterback? Who will be starting everywhere, as UTEP will be starting the 24 season with over 75% of the roster being brand new, and 18 or more of them being brand new starters on both sides of the ball. So to me, the Miners their make or break season will depend on how well a newly formed defensive line and linebacker core will do, as I don't expect it to gel in game one, but as the season goes on, I feel you will see this team do better and better, and probably better than you think. As you saw with the Huskers a year ago, that 3-3-5 gives most offenses trouble, especially that first year when they don't see it very often. It's a scheme that most other teams see probably the one time, so the only time they practice it is 1 week period when they're getting ready for the Huskers or they're getting ready for UTEP. The good news for the Huskers and their offense is that Dylan Raiola will have been going against their own 3-3-5 defense since he walked through the door in January. So I don't think it's going to be too much a problem on his end, but I do feel UTEP's unique scheme will benefit them throughout this year, just like it did the Huskers a year ago. I feel like they're going to be better than expected defensively, especially defensively, as they have some key players and one key returner. Also, along with a decent playmakers on offense that was brought over. And for this reason, I feel the Miners, to me, will probably make a bowl game, probably will end up around that 6-6 mark, probably barely. But at this stage, even we'd take barely. But their season does depend on a lot of unanswered questions, especially early, which will definitely not be answered by week one against the Huskers. So this is probably a perfect time to be facing this team. And it's also a perfect game for Dylan Raiola and this whole Husker team, which they can use an easier opponent to get their feet wet before dipping their whole body deep into the pool of the Big Ten. I mean, no offense to UTEP, but after the last few years of starting on the road against Big Ten foes, UTEP will seem like a walk in the park compared to the last few years we've had to deal with. But not all is bleak for the Miners. Like I said before, they bring over a key player, a returning key player from UTEP as defensive edge Maurice Westmoreland, who was UTEP's top returning player from last year. 6'2", 235 pounds, is a star and was first-team all-conference player last year. And in only his second season with the Miners, he led the team with 7.5 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss. So don't go in and underestimate this team. We've already shown previously in the last few years that the Huskers being favored is no guarantee win. And when's the last time we actually seen an opening opponent win? If you remember, even the Northwestern game up in Ireland, I think the Huskers were favored in that. I really believe Minnesota was actually favored by 2 or 3 points last year, and that was probably because it was up in Minnesota. But the last I've heard on this game, for the UTEP game on game one, the Huskers are a 4-touchdown favorite, which we haven't seen for a while against any opponent, let alone a week one opponent. So I wouldn't go out of my way to put some money down on Nebraska, because as the Huskers have some growing pains of their own and will more likely be starting a brand new quarterback in themselves and a true freshman quarterback as well. But I've said this over and over again, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to say it again here. Dylan Raiola is not your typical freshman, and I guarantee you're going to see that, and you're probably going to see it early. This kid is as cool as a cucumber. Nothing seems to rattle him. You could tell he's been coached and coached extremely well up to this point by some professional quarterback coaches. And you could see it in how he acts and the little bit we've seen him play. So I don't expect him to have too many issues in game one. And the Huskers should come out 1-0 for the first time since Kennedy was president. Okay, maybe not Kennedy, but it definitely seems like it's been that long. Now, this will be the first time in school history that the Miners have faced off against Nebraska. And after how the last few years have gone, I just wouldn't guarantee anything right now, especially in week one. But everything has changed so much for the Miners that, to me, I just see this as more of a rebuilding year, and especially early in their season, especially in game one with the addition of a bunch of transfers and some top recruits that are going to be starting. I just don't think they're going to have it figured out by game one. But I'm telling you, because of these additions of the transfers and pulling in their best recruiting class in their school history, I see this team putting a half-decent season together this year and making a bowl. And I feel like Walden's going to get them back on track, and you're going to see this team grow. So their fans will need to be patient. They're going to have to be kind of like the Husker fans. We're going to have to be patient, as year one's going to be more of a rebuilding year, but it's definitely encouraging for the future for UTEP. And I expect a very different and confident team to come into Lincoln from the UTEP Miners come in 2028, as the Huskers will face this team again in 2028. And I guarantee you it's going to be a different story on who comes in. You better be hoping that Nebraska is back where they want to be at that time as well. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support.